This podcast provides a platform to discuss important questions and complex issues, challenge the status quo, and confront the boundaries of the establishment. I'm retired Police Chief Daniel Hahn. I went from being arrested at 16 to serving over 34 years in law enforcement. My goal is to keep you informed with news not being reported, voices not being heard, and the untold history of how we got here so that we can create a way forward. All right, so we're back on A Way Forward. My special guest today is Dr. B.J. Snowden, and I'm only going to give you a smidgen of his background because I think it's better to hear it from him. B.J. is currently the Associate Vice President of Equity, Institutional Effectiveness, and Innovation at American River College. And I know that's a long title, so at some point we're going to get into what that title means. But as always, I think people learn really good from other people's experiences. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about your upbringing, your experiences, significant things that molded you in your upbringing, and then eventually we'll get into what made you go into the field of education. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to be in the space with you today to talk about it. So let's take it all the way back, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
I was born in the Bay Area, so actually Mountain View, California, in between San
First
Jose
of all,
and
are
Stanford.
you a Raiders fan or a Niners fan?
I'm a Raiders fan.
Okay, we're good then.
So we're good?
All right.
Okay.
Now
Yeah, so I'm going back to that. So, I came up in a loving Black home. Both of my parents stayed together and had been a part of my life through adulthood. So being born in the Bay Area, extremely multicultural. The neighborhood that we moved into, we had literally, I used to call it United Nations, right?
Okay.
And this is as a kid. But the house on the corner, my best friend is Filipino and white. The next door neighbors were from Japan. We were the Black family. Next door to me was a family who had immigrated from Mexico. And then the next house over was a family who had immigrated from like Ukraine, right?
Cool.
So when we looked at our street and when I looked at growing up, I had such a rich experience between getting to know people, learning language, food. So from 0 to 13, I really grew up in a space where my race was something that was celebrated, right? My diversity, my experiences, right? Going next door for
Cool.
sushi, then the next weekend they come over for barbecue, right? It was an amazing experience, and it really shaped me as a young person to see people for who they are and see people from the culture they came from and their background, their family's background. So around the age of 13, my father, who had been an educator, decided to go into management and decided to get a job with the state of California. And as you know, Sacramento is the place where people who work for the state end up being. So we uprooted and we moved to Sacramento in the middle of or at the end of my 7th grade year.
That's tough, right? You already
Whoa.
probably saw what high school you were going to and everything.
I had plans. When I tell you I had plans, I was excited. I had gone to the
What high school were you
Piedmont Hills. I was going to Piedmont Hills. I knew it. I could walk there. I used to ride my bike up there.
Yeah.
It was really devastating, actually, because I had gone to elementary and junior high with the same kids from the neighborhood,
Right.
and I'd been with the same cohort my entire life. So coming up here, we moved to the South Sacramento area, right, Franklin and Florin.
Okay.
And we spent a year there as my parents were trying to find a house. And after a year down in Franklin and Florin in the late 80s, right, it was a new experience.
Not too far from G Parkway.
Right around the corner from G Parkway. And I'll be honest, right, I had never been in a neighborhood or an environment where I had heard gunshots, right? I had never been in a place where gangs were actually present in the community. And I had never been in a space where I could be targeted because of my race. I could be on the street and hanging out, and then whether it be other kids or even law enforcement could see me as a potential threat or see me in a potential way. And those were lessons I wasn't planning to
Another challenge for a
Right.
teenager that's already dealing with enough challenges, right?
I got to a point where my mom was like, you can't go outside, right? You can't, because it was getting bad.
Right.
We were being um, really strategic about, just how we were being out and just kind of waiting for this house to get built. And after a year, we ended up moving to Elk Grove. You want to talk about a shift in reality,
Especially back in the 80s. Wasn't
especially
as
like,
large as it is today.
oh, it was
Yeah.
two lane
Yeah.
four-way stop signs
Yeah.
and 2-lane roads,
Yeah.
right? So I ended up at finishing 8th grade and in Elk Grove Unified. I ended up,
Go Kerr?
I went to Kerr,
Okay.
and it was one of a few black students. So I'm coming from this black neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
going to a school where they're still wearing cowboy boots and where they are very vocal about their feelings towards black people. And again, this is
You
within.
left the United Nations, is what
I
you're saying.
left and you got to imagine this is a shock to my system
Right.
because for all intents and purposes, I had grown up with black people as in my family. I had grown up in my neighborhood in a very diverse area, culturally rich area, and I had come to Sacramento, and I immediately was living in a predominantly black neighborhood, but then going to school in a predominantly white neighborhood, and just it was clashing. And I just didn't know where I fit in, getting into my own identity, right? I didn't know if I was going to start listening to country music or if I needed to, get affiliated,
Not
right?
to mention friends, right? Friends at school are different than friends at home because you're living in two different.
And that's where I really didn't have much of both, right?
Right.
I was really kind of isolated, and I'd gone from the space of being very much a part of a community to really it's just me and my parents. So that was tough. And then got to high school.
Elk Grove High School, I assume?
Nah, another big switch. Florin High School had just opened
okay.
2 years prior.
Okay.
Now, this was the actual blending of all the worlds.
Right.
So Florin was a new high school, and it was much more diverse than Elk Grove High School. But at the same time, right, you had new communities being built, people coming from the Bay Area. You had a little bit more affluence. And then you had the pipeline of kids who were coming in from schools like James Rudder. And it was sort of amazing for us to kind of figure this out on its own, and being in a new high school where the graduating class was still 2 years out from when I got there. We got to see it grow. And that's where the friends that I still have to
Are
this
you the
day.
first graduating class?
I was a third graduating class,
okay.
right? So that was, my freshman year, there were no seniors. And so that is actually where I feel like I got my roots into Sacramento, right? It was that experience that gave me, lifelong friends, exposure to really what it means to be kind of committed to your own education or your own future journey, whether it be college or not. But it was deep. It was deep.
Cool. So now I know you mentioned your dad was in education. Is that what lit your fire to eventually spend the career that you've had so far in education, or was there something else that made you want to go? And like, when did you decide that that's the sort of thing or the area you wanted to go into?
So the crazy thing about that is my dad being a teacher, my dad being a high school football coach, my dad being in that role is exactly what I wanted to avoid. So I had
You did a good job of that.
Right. I had been going with him to summer school. I've been going with him to football practice, right? I had been around education and had the pressure, right, of having an academic as your parent my entire school career. So it was actually in high school. I got an internship with the Internal Revenue Service. It used to be right off of Watt Avenue. So it was the first time they'd ever done it. It was a high school internship program. I'm in my junior year. And they're like, look, we will pay you to come up and work for us from 1 to 5 days a week. And you'll get high school credits for the internship.
Okay.
Started that my junior year, did well, went through my senior year. And I thought I was going to go actually into federal service. Because by the time I had graduated from high school, I had moved into a GS2 position, advancement, right? So government service level 2. I had started kind of spending time with the criminal investigation division.
So were you thinking like you go into federal service like on the law enforcement side?
I thought I was going to be a criminal investigator for the Internal Revenue Service. Because here's the cool part. They got to wear their suits. They got a badge. They got to carry a gun. and they used to go after white collar crime.
Yeah, they ain't
So
driving around in the street. Yeah,
they're not
right,
on the street,
right,
right?
right.
And there was a level of investigation. There was a level of, just, I think, excitement that came for that. And then my mentors at the time were telling me about, well, if you like this, there's always the FBI or there's always
Right,
other
right.
agencies you can go into. And so as a young man, I felt extremely drawn into service and just so drawn. In fact, I really wasn't even thinking about college. So
Oh,
I,
wow.
I
I'm sure your
ended,
parents like that.
they loved it. So I didn't actually apply at normal deadlines. I didn't set
Wow.
myself up to go to college. So in April of my senior year, my friends started getting on these acceptance letters and everything to college. And I was like, oh, was I supposed to apply?
Oh, was I supposed
Remember,
to?
I was leaving high school at noon every day.
Right.
And so I graduated, average GPA, but I had never taken the ACT or SAT. I had never applied for college.
Wow.
And I wasn't in a position, I was ready to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, education was this thing that I did to get to be able to work.
Right.
And they wanted to hire me full time, but encouraged me to stay on as a student assistant. And they were the ones who said, you got to get enrolled in college. So
Otherwise, you might not have.
I might not have.
Wow.
I wanted to stay working, so I got enrolled in college.
Because you were making decent money.
Making
and
decent
first time
money.
you make decent money, you start forgetting about other
Had
stuff.
a car,
Yeah.
was able to hang out, right? And I
Right.
got to wear, the button-ups.
Right.
So I was
right.
going into a semi-professional place at 17 and 18. I got lucky. So back in the day, if you had a friend who worked at Sac State, someone maybe in admissions or someone maybe in a department office, you could take the paper application up to the university with that $55 check, and they would work with you to get enrolled. So I ended up at Sac State
As a freshman.
As a freshman on the hookup.
Wow.
Right? And let's just say my focus on work and extracurriculars directly impacted my ability to be successful as a student. So back in the day, they used to mail your grades home. So my dad, I'm a junior. My dad and I had the same name. So in December, I will never forget this. Freshman year, is opening the mail. He's assuming this is a tuition bill, that my parents were extremely supportive, that I found my way into college. My dad opened it with the letter opener. I can hear it crisping through the envelope to this day.
You start sprinting.
He opened up the envelope, pulled it out, looking for this bill. It happened to be a transcript of my current grades, final grades, cumulative GPA, 1.13, passed one of my 4 classes, and my father immediately said, this is now your bill. And that was how I decided to figure out how to pay for my own college education.
Well, I find that interesting. Associate vice president of a college had a 1.13 GPA.
Yes. I
Wow.
still have that transcript in my office, and it is something that I hold very, very dear to myself because it gives me motivation to talk about this with other students from an authentic space. Like, yeah, I earned the degrees later, but my first semester, I was immediately placed on academic probation. So my whole first year and going into my second year was about, if I really wanted college, I had to show up and prove it. Otherwise, they were going to ceremoniously dismiss me as they would do so many other students.
Right. So what was the change that got you off the federal law enforcement track and onto the track that you've been on for 20 some years?
I got an F in government. Let's just be honest, right? I don't think it's right to work for the federal government if you can't pass your intro to government course. So then I got slick, and then I was like, well, at least let me take criminal justice. And then I got a C. And then I was like, well, okay, this is getting ridiculous. I know what I want to do, but it doesn't seem that I'm motivated enough or interested enough to be to actually be able to study the field that I think that I'm really interested in. So I started taking other classes in general education to expose me to other things. So took the English class, did pretty well, got the B. Took the speech class, did pretty well, got the B. I took a theater class, and I got an A. And then I took another theater class, and I got an A. And then I started volunteering at the campus radio station. And I got really good at that. And all of a sudden, I started looking around and I was getting great grades in writing, great grades in acting, loved being in front of a microphone. And I started to think that maybe journalism, media, film, radio, something in the entertainment field was more naturally aligned to where I wanted to go professionally. At the very least, I would be able to pass classes and actually get a degree. Because
Right.
one of my mentors was like, look, you should really look for the classes you're passing. And I was like, okay, there might be something unconscious about that. So after 2 years at Sac State, I ended up transferring to San Jose State because Sac State didn't have the media program that I really wanted to go into. And once I got to San Jose State, I completely thrived. I moved on campus, lived in the dorms. I took full loads of classes, worked on campus, was taking nothing but media production, media theory, film courses, radio courses, television production courses. And it went from barely passing C's and B's to 3.0, 3.17, 3.88. I mean, my most impactful semester, I was in a play, I was writing, I was on the radio, interning in San Francisco, taking 22 units, working on campus, and got a 3.8.
And do you think part of that is because these are now classes that you're into and that sparks your fire, or was there other reasons?
I think it's 100% finding a subject that I could dive into deeply. And it wasn't hard to motivate me to study. I wanted to study. I wanted to do the projects. I wanted to do my homework. And I think that is one of the things about college that a lot of students miss uh, through the process of thinking of it like a job, right? It's not supposed to be that hard. If you find the thing that you have a natural strength toward, and or you're just naturally motivated to read about and to be immersed in, college is one of the best experiences you can ever have. And I'm a product of that. So eventually graduating with awards and scholarships and all this stuff, but I started at this place just kind of bumping around, not really having direction.
And I think your first instruction role, if you will, or job was in that field, right? Teaching like radio and theater and those sort of things.
And it was it's really quite serendipitous. So I was in the Bay Area, was looking for a full-time job, and on a
In
week,
what? In this field?
yeah, I was working in radio part-time.
But not teaching probably, right?
I wasn't really thinking about teaching.
Right.
I had this idea of, I can make $100 a day as a substitute teacher. So I went and applied to get that going, and I was doing that pretty well. But I had come home on one of my weekends, and I run into my former vice president or vice principal at the high school, Dr. LaWanda Stovall. I'll never forget this meeting. I think it was literally a Safeway. And she asked me how I was doing. And I was like, you know what? I finally graduated.
She's like, thank goodness.
Right. I'm only 5 years out of high school. I am thinking about moving back to Sacramento. I studied film. I studied radio. I studied production. She's like, you know what? We have an ROP teacher who's resigning, and the subject matter is TV.
Is this at Florin?
Yeah.
Huh.
And it was the program that I actually participated in loosely when I was in high school. It was because it was a new high school, it had all this money. They had a television studio when I was there, and they used to run an after-school tutoring program on Access called Ask a Friend. And it had evolved since I had left, but they still had this funding to support a production course that started around 1 o'clock in the afternoon and went till 4. So high school students could be in this really immersive environment producing content for the high school. And they had nobody in mind to take over. So I said, well, what do I need? And they were like, well, you need a special credential. So I applied for that, got it.
Like a voc ed credential or something?
Got the credential, started in August. And I ended up being a teacher at my former high school in media production.
So, and that's how 20 plus years of education started.
Yeah.
From a conversation in a
at a
store
Safeway.
with somebody that believed in you from your past.
Absolutely.
That, What's interesting about that, I hear that story over and over and over. People that end up in places they didn't think they were going to end up, and it just happens to be somebody that believed in them and all that. I think early on in your, or fairly early on in your career, you were uh, working and doing things in regards to reentry. So
Hmm.
people that have spent time in custody in state prisons
Yeah.
and now are coming back. And to this day, that's a very challenging subject for our society and our community, as the vast majority of people that go to prison eventually come back to the community. And I personally think we do a fairly poor job of helping people be successful re-entering into our community. But I think you've done some pretty significant things in that area. I'd love for you to talk about one, first of all, what you did, what your role and effort was in regards to that.
Yeah. I think right before I talk about my role, let me just say that if I didn't have personal experience with uh, uh, individuals who had come home and found it hard to find their way, I don't know that I would have been a great fit for the role. So I'll just back up a little bit and say that while I was a professor, I had a student as a freshman who was so charismatic, so dynamic, so intelligent, young black male, and he made a terrible mistake. And he got caught with a gun with a certain amount of an illegal substance and was convicted and sent away for up to 10 years, but ended up only serving 4 or 5. I had written a letter to the judge advocating for this young man. He was in college, and I really thought that he had a lot of potential. I stayed in touch with his mother. I stayed in touch with his sister, who was transferring to UCLA at the time. So he came from a good
Hmm.
foundation, a good background. Upon his release, I get a call, get a text.
So he was your student while he was still in custody?
Yeah, he was my student before
Oh, okay.
he was
Gotcha.
my student for a whole semester. He was still my student in another class the second semester when he got caught up.
Okay.
So I have this history with this young man.
Mhm.
So he calls me as soon as he gets out. He's like, "I'm coming back to school." I was like, "Well, good, because I've been telling your mama and telling your sister that this is the first stop you need to make when you get out." So he comes back, and the first thing on his mind is like, "What can I do now? What can I career wise? What can I do?" Because now I have a felony
Right.
on my record, and I'm now 23 years old. And we talk really earnestly about it. And I'm in media production, and entrepreneurship is
And you're at
definitely
the community
something.
college at this point?
I'm still at community college. I'm at
Okay.
Cosumnes River College. So he comes back, and it's a little rocky because he feels the stigma,
Right.
but he starts to thrive again and eventually gets on his feet and is taking classes and doing well. So I say all that to say that that experience really touched me
His
personally. His
challenges. Yeah.
challenges, and now just being aware
Right.
that I can see these challenges. So I think within the next year after he had gotten home and was a student again, uh, the state chancellor's office for California community colleges had a Senate bill that had been passed that allowed for them to receive full apportionment for teaching classes inside of a prison. So what that means is normally a community college can receive full state payment or reimbursement for a course if it's not open access, which means if we offer a class at this location, that means anyone in the state who wants to take that class would need to have open access to that.
Okay.
So, what this bill allowed us to do is close access for specific classes inside of California state prisons. And that's a game changer. So now it incentivizes the colleges to run the courses with the full professors that would be teaching on the outside on the inside.
Okay.
So to get that off the ground, they needed to create a grant process, to a pilot program, and they needed somebody to run it. Now, passionate about the work, yes. Ton of experience working inside of a prison, working with CDCR, absolutely not.
Kind of a different twist of what you thought you wanted to do in high school, but
Right.
still kind of related to
But
the.
brought me back to service.
Yes.
And brought me back to a profession in law enforcement that I had a deep level of reverence and respect for. So to me, it was sort of like combining an early passion with this knowledge and skill set that I had cultivated as a professional. So I jumped at the opportunity. And I got to serve as the statewide director of inmate and reentry education for the California Community College Chancellor's Office. Now, what that role afforded me to do was to work with the 4 pilot colleges who were trying to offer classes and eventually degree programs.
What were those first 4?
So that's Folsom Lake College, Antelope Valley College, I think Pierce College, and
So that covers like the whole state?
yeah, no, we
Okay.
went up and down the state. The pilot program also, because this was new for the colleges, required us to liaison with not only CDCR, but private universities who had been doing the work before. So there's a program down at San Quentin that works with a private university, and those professionals have been working with the incarcerated students for years. So we partner with them. So I got a private university partnership, learning. We have some advocacy groups that are advising us and writing the white papers, writing the journals on this work. And then we have our community colleges, and then we have CDCR. And I'm the point person for all of them. And I'm the one who is now tasked with developing the professional development plan for colleges to learn how to implement this, for faculty who are going to be going into the system, and to work out all the nuts and bolts.
These weren't on Zoom. These were
This is
inside. Yeah.
This is going inside. And then you have to think about with protocols and safety and requirements, what is it that we're not going to be able to do on the inside that we're able to do on the outside? One of my favorite examples is fill out the application.
Right.
It's that granular. Like, how do we do things that we sort of had taken for granted as automatic? Well, everyone should be able to do that. We didn't have paper apps anymore.
Right.
So getting paper versions, getting versions that were
Even
fillable.
literacy for the people inside.
Exactly. And then it's like selecting the students, right? Working directly with CDCR to select the right students that are already in an education pipeline, because this is college. So there's the GED path, right, in prison. And then there are folks who have their high school diploma and have shown an interest in going. And I think the first classes were like English, public speaking. Then we were starting to look at ways, could we do something like computers or computer programming? Could we do something like Microsoft Office Suite? Could we? And the answer is yes. We could do it all.
But CDCR might have some reservations about technology,
or
right?
just rules.
Right.
But it's being able to have someone comfortable enough to talk to a warden, to then talk to a CO, take all that information, translate it to a professor and a vice president, translate that back over to the chancellor's office and see what we need to do in regards to funding and how this would work. And being in that space, a little bit of my acting background probably helped. A little bit of my experience within a community college system probably helped. But I think the thing that helped the most was having and remembering what it was like for someone who knew that education could help them, even though they were justice involved.
It sounds like it's part of your role was a lot of getting some true collaboration between groups that might not believe in it, haven't traditionally done that sort of collaborate. These aren't the people I normally collaborate with. And I don't know, maybe even some biases in terms of, I don't think these people deserve that.
Well, not even
was
maybe.
part of it.
Well, let's just be honest, right? It's winning over hearts and minds. There were definite, that's why there was a pilot. There were definitely colleges where leadership or faculty were like, absolutely not.
Right.
Then there's the bargaining units. Well, you're going to send my unit member into a prison? That's not safe. Right. And then creating systems to be able to teach educators about really what the experience is like.
Speaking of that, let me just, I got 2 questions real quick on this very topic. So you personally, what was your mission or your goal in doing this work? You personally, not the colleges, not the chancellor's office, but you personally.
I personally met a lot of men in prison who reminded me of myself. And my personal goal was to do something that changed the way we treat men when they come out of prison. And I say that because I was running into men who were my exact age, who had gone in at the same time I was at parties where people were getting shot, or I was seeing things that were were definitely illegal happening, and these are the ones who got caught in the
Right.
system. I saw myself in these men, and that was really something I had to reflect on. And so getting into the work, I loved the opportunity. I thought it was great. I thought it was service, right? I thought it was good. But personally, what kept me motivated, what kept me charged up was somebody's got to make a difference. And it needs to be somebody who can not only have empathy, but I think from my lens, felt themselves in the people who would be helped the most by this opportunity.
And I would imagine I often say, like, the difference between me and some of my friends was just like one thing, like my family versus their family and the support system you had that helped you make those decisions to stay away, that maybe they didn't have that support. So you just change one thing and the roads diverge. Second question, I've been inside numerous prisons, multiple times. Um, I'm curious, the first time you went inside a state prison, like, what was your initial reaction? Because I think there's a lot of mystery in the general public's mind about what a prison is, because there are these big cement walls that you don't go on the other
Right.
side, right? So, what was your very first? Because I know even to this day, when I walk in a prison, my initial reaction is different than once I've been there for 30 minutes or 40 minutes. But I'm curious, the very first time you went inside an institution, uh, what were your feelings, reactions, initial response?
You know what's crazy is they they did not slow walk me into this.
They never do.
My first prison was Corcoran.
Okay.
So that's a overnight trip.
Mhm.
So the night before, I'm going down, I'm getting my little Hilton Garden Inn situation going on, and I'm fine. I'm like a night. I'm looked at the form. I'm cleared for entry. I got a map to find it. I had never driven to a prison, and I have my outfit already laid out because they were like, you can't
Certain
wear this,
colors.
you
Yep.
can't
Yep.
wear that,
Right.
right? Don't come with a tie. Don't do the X, Y, and Z. So no phones, no nothing. I'm good. So I'm prepared. I feel confident, and I show up to the prison, and I'm driving, and my phone GPS is like 5 miles away, and I'm fine. 3 miles away, I'm fine. 2 miles away, my hands start getting a little clammy. 1 mile away, and I'm seeing the walls, I'm seeing the lights, I'm seeing the towers, I'm seeing everything else, and I drive right past it. No, I just drive right past
Like
the
you're
prison.
spacing out.
I
Got
just
it.
I spaced out, or something was like, you're not
No.
ready. So I make the UE. Now I'm looking like I'm doing illegal, like I'm scoping the place. So now I'm
Right.
feeling nervous about just making
Right.
the weird U. Find parking, go up to the gate, and I'm like, hey, I'm here for the meeting. And none of the people I'm supposed to meet with are there because they had gotten there early and were already inside. So I thought I was going to meet a cohort of people I had been meeting with on the outside at the gate, and then we were all going to go in.
They were
No,
already in.
they were already in because they had been there before.
Right.
Everything was
Right.
good. So I'm by myself, standing in the holding area before you get ushered in.
That isn't some fancy area, I'm
It's
sure.
not. It's not the lobby of the Hyatt. It is very secure, lots of cameras, and they're asking you a lot of questions about what you're doing. And all I could think about in my mind was, I hope I didn't bring my phone. I have nothing. I was really worried about the rules.
Right.
And then I get through the gate, and then I hear the
The clang.
unlocking and the clank. And I'm hearing and I'm processing everything on a heightened level. I am hearing everybody breathe. I'm hearing the fans and the air coming through the vents. And then I start to breathe. And it's okay. I've stepped inside of the prison and they have closed me in. And I start to smell and feel and observe the colors and the walls. And I'm like, surprisingly, this looks like a lot of high schools.
Mhm.
Like the brick or the walls, the way it's painted, the hallway structure, and there was a familiarity to it that I was like, okay, I'm not intimidated, but now I'm curious.
Mhm.
What would it be like to be here every day
And not leaving a couple hours later.
and not being able to leave
Right.
at any point?
Right.
So I think what the biggest takeaway I had and the biggest feeling and emotion I was having after I stepped in for the first time was curiosity. And that curiosity led me to listen, I think, more intently to the stories of the COs, the stories of the warden, the stories of the inmates, and feel better about it. Now, don't get me wrong, that was just the prison part. What actually messed me up was the yard.
Yeah.
And I was fine.
You're
Again,
wondering who's going to protect me in here?
yeah, no, we had the meeting, we were doing good work, and then an hour in, all right, let's go through the yard because we want to go to the other yard. So we want to go from B to C.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why does that sound outside? Like, why does it sound like I'm about to go outside
In just the general area.
during time where everybody out? And then we get outside and it's hot and it's Corcoran and we're not even going to the max side. We're just in the yard and I see the brothers working. I see the different
They're
factions.
not in handcuffs.
Not
they're
in
not
handcuffs.
custody. They're freely walking
and
around.
walking around the track and they're doing, and then I'm just like, okay, now this
Everybody
got real.
in here is a killer in your mind, right?
This is the realest it had ever gotten. And then I was like, so this is just mixed up? Like everybody out, no matter what you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, yeah, they last week, and then started telling me about, they had a shooting last week. They had to shoot
on
from
that
the tower,
yard, probably.
on
right?
that yard.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, what? Like, no, they will shoot. And then somebody was on the loudspeaker talking about, please step behind the yellow line, because somebody had been close to the line and the guard wasn't playing. It was like, this could go down. And then they wanted to give us, oh, by the way, if anything does happen, here's where I'm going to need you guys to go. I'm like, wait, you just now telling me
Let's go back to the room.
there's an escape plan? Because if it goes down, we can't move. And they were like, if it goes down, you just got to go down. Like, I don't care what you're wearing, just go down, comply. You cannot be the only people standing up. So that was the part that
got real.
That's when curiosity turned into, oh, this is real prison. Stop. And so it was good. We went over to the other yard, but then I got to see the spot where, there are inmates who outside time still means they're in a cage.
A very small one, too.
Very small one. And these are the people who aren't getting out, right? So what I learned about that in my first experience was there are levels to this, and that there are some inmates who are on a path, even lifers, on a path to lifelong learning and to personal growth. And then there are other members of our society who have committed heinous crimes and done things that will not allow them to be interactive with other people in a normal way ever again. Right. And that's just the system that we currently have.
So I want to close with two questions. First one related to this. So it doesn't matter what period of time you're in, the politics of safety, if you will, are always, if you listen to any local politics now, safety is on the agenda. Seattle just had, this last week, had elections on city council. And all the council members that were incumbents that were really on the defund, reimagine, they all lost. And people that weren't, super conservative, lock everybody up, but more moderate, were ahead. And I think we keep going in these cycles from one extreme to the other extreme, and I don't think we belong at either extreme. But I'm curious, with this experience, not only your experience going inside institutions, but your work at the chancellor level, statewide level, what would you say are the top, 1, 2, or 3 things that the community, that society, that our leaders should be thinking about when it comes to this whole process of incarceration to re-entering into the community? Because the vast majority of people that go into a custody setting eventually come back. And so to me, that's a pretty important area if the vast majority of people are going to be back in our community. And California traditionally doesn't do a good job with that, with a high recidivism rate. So what do you think are the top things that people should be thinking about? How do we make our communities and the people coming back into the communities successful and safe and thriving?
Well, the first thing I would say is that rehabilitation is real. I don't think that it's just some magic word that we say should happen, but I believe in it. And I believe that there are people who come out of our prison system who have every intention of fulfilling that promise and have been rehabilitated from their prior mistakes, right? So that's the first and foremost. And I think having recognizing that bias that we have about just the idea of someone who has spent time in custody is something that we need to unpack and be honest about as a society, right? It is beyond important that that is unlocked and that is worked through.
That's a big hurdle, right?
That's a huge hurdle. I mean, we don't acknowledge the biases we have about
Right.
Pepsi versus Coke.
Right.
So the idea of unlocking and unpacking the biases that we have about a person who has been incarcerated,
That other
that other,
over there.
and don't even add race on top of that, right?
Right.
Because there are biases. There is a feeling in our community about someone who is black who has been in prison versus someone who is probably, let's say, just white who comes out of prison, right? And then what opportunities are afforded to those individuals. I think the second thing that we need to do is, as a community, is truly invest in opportunity for those who are formerly incarcerated. An opportunity both in employment and in housing. I think that one of the factors that I keep hearing and I keep seeing as a barrier to staying on the right track is very simple, basic needs. I need a place to sleep that's safe, that keeps me out of harm's way, right? I don't need to be back at my homie's couch because my homie's not doing things that is right. I think the other part of that is, and that I'll just say that that's something we can invest in. That's something that if it was a priority, we could make accommodations and make changes for that. So, beyond the acknowledgement of the bias and believing in rehabilitation, the housing, and I think the third part, selfishly, has to do with education and connecting stronger connections between those who are coming out and what kind of skills they either have or could earn with the support of education. That could be adult ed, that could be community college, that could be going to a 4-year like Sac State. I think there is an opportunity there to give a true valuable skill set to someone and make sure that they can get it at an affordable rate, and make sure that they have the then full benefits of that network to help them land safely in our communities.
So it sounds to me like you're saying when you refer to education, you're not only referring to like a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. It sounds like you're also saying in the education bucket is vocational training, certificates, whatever this person needs to chase what is fulfilling them, right? Like you said, when you got into something that fulfilled you, then you started
Right.
thriving.
We create space to help people find their passion. I don't know about you, but I am not great at plumbing, and
Neither am
I
I have to
gotta.
hire
I
somebody
have
for
to
that.
hire somebody, right? That takes a very particular skill set. But one of the skill sets of that is being a people person,
Right.
being able to understand and use tools, being able to do that we can train you to do.
Right.
Carpentry, creativity. We could do more with art. We could do more with machine building. I'm thinking about solar development, panels, and building charging stations. There is a future economy in this work that is tied to vocational ed. And we have to get out of our own way of thinking of college as just the classics, right? So there's opportunity there.
Good. So last question I have for you. I can still remember when you first got the position you're currently in. I said, "Man, this brother has a long title. That is one of the longest titles I've ever heard of." And that title is Associate Vice President of Equity, Institutional Effectiveness, and Innovation at American River College. So just share with us, what is that? What do you do? What is that position?
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. So I'll start with each bucket. So on the equity side, I serve as the college's equity officer, which means I am responsible for assisting in our growth, both in the classroom and outside, towards an equity experience for students. I also manage sort of the complaint process for discrimination and bias at the college. So I get to hear sort of the ugly side of how people can interact with one another and try to minimize the damage that can be done to our students. I also get the honor of being the manager above or working through or with our affinity programs. So our centers of affiliation, our Anapizi or Asian Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian, our Native American, Alaskan Indian group, our Black student, our Latinx student group, our LGBTQIA plus affiliated group, right? I get to help guide those affinity spaces. On the institutional effectiveness side, my responsibility is over research and process. So the data about the college is under my purview, and I get to work collaboratively with the dean of research on the reports that we generate and giving the information and data needed for effective decision making. I sit on the president's cabinet with that role, and I'm able to inform our executive leadership weekly on the what's happening with the college in regards to data and where we may have gaps. And then there is the innovation part. I get to seek opportunity to make change. I get to be creative. I get to start new initiatives and create new partnerships. So, some examples of that include I am working collaboratively with a nonprofit called Improve Your Tomorrow. We've created campus space for them to do mentoring work. I'm also looking at working with partners like UC Davis Health to create a potential internship for students to get into the health field, not just being a nurse, not just being a doctor, but imagine all the jobs
More
affiliated.
collaboration.
Exactly, right. Playing into my strengths and doing work like that. And also bringing community onto the community college campus. So I have a very deep passion for contracting with local businesses and supporting them and giving them opportunities to work with, I mean, one of the most dynamic community college districts in the state, one of the oldest and largest colleges in the state. I mean, this is a great opportunity. So I get to marry all of that, and it turns into like 12-hour days. But I love what I do. I love what I do, and it keeps me connected to students.
Well, it sounds like when there's something that, say, American River College could be better at, then you go out and partner with somebody that is good at, a IYT that is able to connect and build those connections. So, very last question I have for you, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. As a graduate from a community college before I went on to Sac State, I think California community colleges are one, if not the largest, one of the largest community college systems in our country. And when I was young, it was completely free, and now I think it's free again.
Yeah.
Which is awesome because it creates opportunities for people that might not otherwise get those opportunities. So, to close out today, what advice would you give to the young little Snowden that maybe isn't quite sure about higher education, maybe is kind of thinking about not going, maybe doesn't know what they want to do? In regards to the community college system, what would you tell that young person about, or what advice would you give that young person, especially related to the community college opportunities?
I think the community college opportunity is unique in our higher ed system in that it gives you freedom without the overcommitment financially, but you get the same experience. My analogy is that it's the outlet of a major brand. So you can go get that Gucci belt at Gucci Direct, or you can go down to Vacaville and go to the Gucci outlet and get the same belt for half the price. And that's what I see community colleges at. It's the same value, it's the same experience, but it's a financially and sometimes just in regards to how you're treated and how you're nurtured, better option in higher ed. And to, let's say, the younger me, I would say that anytime you're looking at bettering yourself, invest fully. I see a challenge with our students today in that they are trying college and not experiencing college and not diving in deep to college. It's a class here, a class there to see if I want to do it, but I'm really worried about
Which
working
online probably plays a little into that, right? You're not really getting a full
I think at a younger age, the online plays a part in it, but the online could also be an advantage to those who don't have a traditional schedule or traditional availability, right? But I think
they might not be able to go otherwise.
Right. I just think it's the full investment. So, for example, don't take 2 classes, take 4, right? Go meet with the counselor, go talk to someone before you just sign up for classes about your interests. Take an aptitude test. They're online, they're free. Invest in yourself because this is one of the few things in life that people that don't expire and people can't take away from you. So when you get the letters behind your name, those are good for life, right? And they open more doors to you.
Absolutely.
So if anything else, this is just putting time and effort into your future so that you can reap the benefits of a larger network and more opportunity for you in the future.
Awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate your time, and I think people will really benefit from your experiences and your knowledge and all the things that you've done. And I love your story because it sounds like so many other stories where it started is not where it progressed, and who knows where it will end. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
I loved it. Thank you very much.
One of the big purposes of A Way Forward is to hear different voices and different opinions, because that is how we can make informed decisions ourselves. So if you are someone that would like to come on A Way Forward to express your opinion, go to chiefhahn.com/podcast. Chief, HAHN.com/podcast.